Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Right, US Open Power Rankings first edition for the ATP is coming. We're going to go through it. It's our first edition. I cannot wait. I genuinely can't wait to go through this. Of course, I'm going to list from 1 to 10, 1 being the player who I feel at the moment has the best chance of winning the US Open, catering in current form as being one of the biggest things. Now, current form includes, of course, current as in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, but also we're looking at the year as a whole. And we'll also be looking at the US Open last year, of course, looking at the historical results from last year and tournaments before. But the biggest thing is going to be formed throughout 2022 and the last few months, just so you guys know how we do it. But we also look at historical stuff as well. Right, okay. In terms of how we're going to go through it, I'm going to go through from 1 to 10. We're going to start with number 1, and then we will talk about everything else. Cool. Number 1. Who do we go with? Before we do, actually, remember to hit that like button, subscribe if you're new, of course. And you forgot that. Right, do that. Thank you so much. Number one. I'm doing this, by the way. I've thought roughly about who I'm going to choose, but I wanted to go through with you guys and let you know my thought process. Hopefully not too long as well. It has to surely be the Spaniard, the Matador, Rafael Nadal. Now, a lot of people might think, oh, Nadal, what about Medvedev, who made the US Open final last year and, of course, won it? He won the US Open last year. He's the reigning champion. He's just won Los Cabos. He skipped Wimbledon. And in Australia, he made the final as well, losing to Rafa Nadal. So you could arguably say in the last 12 months, he is the best hardcourt player. And I think you're probably not wrong in saying that. But I think given that Nadal has won the Australian Open this year, which is the only hardcourt Grand Slam so far, given that he won the French as well, given that, he made the semifinals of Wimbledon, which Wimbledon is his worst surface, grass is his worst surface. If he's fully fit, I would put him as the favorite against Kyrgios. He pulled out because of injury. Who knows what would have happened? He could have been the final against Djokovic. Maybe he loses to Kyrgios. Maybe he loses to Djokovic. We'll never know. But his results have been fantastic throughout the whole year, right? He's been the most informed player this year. So for me, and considering his record of 4 US Open wins, it's a slower hard court. It's not as quick as Australia, where, of course, he won. He beat Medvedev in the final there in 5 sets. In the US, it plays more similarly to clay in terms of the speed. So for me, Rafa Nadal, number 1 at the moment in the power rankings. Now, it's a difficult one as well because he's not actually playing the Rogers Cup at the moment because of injury. So we're hoping to see him back next week or very, very soon. And also in Cincinnati, etc. So I'm hoping he's going to play those tournaments. Otherwise, he may end up dropping because we just don't have anything to kind of base this on. We've got some data at the moment to base it on, but if players like Medvedev start wrapping up loads of tournament victories, then he might then drop down a place if Nadal is still not playing, because I know with the GOATs, they have a little asterisk next to them in the sense that there's a little subtext underneath that says, doesn't matter if they haven't played any tournaments, they can still win Grand Slams. And that's pretty much true because we saw it with Nadal this year in Australia, had a long layoff, came back and won it. It happens. These guys are just our GOATs. Djokovic, of course, to let you guys know, won't be in the list because currently he's not able to play at the US Open. If it does change, and if he is able to play at the US because of a change in rules and regulations of his, his vaccination status, or the country say that actually he's allowed in, then we will, of course, include him in the power rankings. He'll be up there and pretty high. Number 2, then, I've talked about him, and I think he kind of picks himself. Daniel Medvedev. We covered Los Cabos, and he was there. He won it. He looked pretty damn good. And it was great to see him back in form, back after a disappointing omission from Wimbledon. It would have been great to see him there, and I think he would have gone pretty deep as well. He doesn't like the clay, so it wasn't a surprise at the French Open. And the US Open, he'll go into it and he'll feel good about it. I think he actually. I was going to say he likes the slower hard courts more, but I'm not quite sure if he does because in Australia he is able to deflate the pace a bit more. Doesn't really need to generate much pace. In the US, you need to. It's a bit slower. This year could be quicker. We don't know. The tournaments can play differently each year, but there's a generic thought among fans and pundits that the Grand Slams play a certain way, but it can change year on year, and you can have anomalies. So we'll see. But last year was slow, and he won, and he looked imperious, and he won in the final in straight sets against Novak Djokovic. He was going for the Grand Slam, was incredible last year, Novak, and Medvedev just brushed it off like it was nothing. So he is a very, very good player, and we saw that against Cam Norrie recently, winning in straight sets, bageling him in the second set as well, 6-love. I mean, he is looking really good. He loves the hard courts. This is the back end of the year after Wimbledon is his bread and butter. The last couple of years, he's just cleaned up, and he'll love the US Open. He'll love the Paris Masters indoor tournament. All these tournaments in the US, Canada, etc. He is relishing them. You can bet that. Number 3. Now, who do we go with? Because there's a few players, of course, drifting around, right? There's quite a few. Kyrgios just won Washington, singles and doubles, although this is, of course, just a singles list. Also made the final of Wimbledon. Felix, right, went deep at the US Open last year. He's just made the semis of Los Cabos as well. Wimbledon, not as good as he would have hoped, I guess. We're losing in the first round against Maxime Cressy, but it is a different surface. Form doesn't count, yes, but it seems like he's been able to recapture most of that. Cam Norrie just made the final of Los Cabos, of course. He's looking pretty good. Did get dismantled in the final in the second set, but the first set was a tiebreaker, looking pretty good. And then you've got to look at other players. Tsitsipas, right? Last year at the US Open. Upset by Alcaraz in the US Open. Can he, I guess, pick himself up from that? Zverev injured, looking like he's probably not going to play. It's pretty wide open after the first two, if I'm being completely honest. I think you really have Nadal and Medvedev, and they're kind of in their own bracket, and then it's everyone else, and it's a free-for-all. If I'm going on current form and kind of staying true to my word around mainly basing, I guess, on this year and this year's results, then you have to go with the big man, Nick Kyrgios. He didn't drop a single set. Sorry, didn't drop serve at all even in Washington. Just looks so good right now. And he's admitted himself that he is playing some fantastic tennis. He's transformed. I'm very much looking forward to seeing him for the rest of the year. I find him really exciting to watch. Of course, there's other baggage around it, but I do think generally he has been better this year with that stuff as well. I think it's always going to be a part of his game, but it's getting better for me anyway. Now, the rest is really tough. I have to be honest with you. I'm not quite sure where to go from here because I do feel as if these guys are fantastic and that's all great, but can we really pick many other players that we think comfortably are going to be the challengers? And the answer to that is probably no. If I'm being honest with you, it's probably no. It's a tough one. It really is. I'm going to go with number 4. Number four. Of course, the final of Washington was Nishioka. Rublev in the semis as well. We're talking about those guys, US Open. If we think back to last year, who went deep. There were some good players that went deep. But do we really back them to go deep again? I'm not so sure. I'm going to go with a slight left field option. Now, I'm not quite sure whether it's going to hold up, and we'll see. But I'm going to go with Yannick Sinner. And I'll tell you why. Because Yannick Sinner is a player who I feel has come into his own. He's a player who definitely is starting to look like a more complete player. He's bulked up his serve more. I was really impressed with him at Wimbledon. Had never won a grass court match. Applied himself fantastically. Now, a lot of people pegged him as a clay court specialist. He'd actually never won a clay court tournament, sorry, until Umag, where he beat Alcaraz for the second time in not too long. Beat him at Wimbledon, of course, a bit of an upset there, I would say, considering he'd never won a grass court match. Beat him in the round of 16. Played really well. I mean, his serve has been bulked up. He's hitting spots better. His return has always been natural. And in terms of his forehand, I mean, especially the running forehand, looks sublime at times. The backhand has always been solid, and we've seen when he plays someone like a Zverev, he's able to stick with him backhand to backhand, and even a Djokovic, he has 2 sets of love up against him in the quarterfinals. Yes, Djokovic never looked like he was going to lose because in the third set, fourth set, fifth set, he wasn't in trouble in any of those sets, but to even get to 2 sets of love up against Djokovic was an incredible feat, considering his lack of experience on the surface and lack of wins. He was 0-2 going into the tournament. So he's clearly a special player. He's also a player who I think is able to play on all surfaces. He won the next gen finals on a hard court. He's won tournaments on hard courts before. So for me, he is someone who's going to be really dangerous on the hard courts, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing him continue his progression on there. And himself and Alcaraz and the other young guns, they're coming, and they may not be here right now, and everyone talks about the next gen or next gen. It's just a matter of time. And what it will take is it will take an Alcaraz or a Sinner or someone to really to beat a Nadal or Djokovic, and probably not just beat them, but maybe beat them in 3 or 4 sets in a slam, or come back from, say, a set down to then start the floodgates, open the floodgates even, and for a change of the guard to start happening, you would imagine. So number 5, we just talked about him, Carlos Alcaraz. Now, Alcaraz, I think, is going to have a good US Open. I do feel that he plays best on a slow, hard court. And I feel like the speed at the US Open is perfect for his game. He's someone who is definitely able to, he wants to transition and come to the net, and that's fantastic. But he's also someone that needs to have, more time on the ball. He does need to have more time on the ball, especially on the backhand side. If he's playing any more than elite backhand, like Zverev, like Djokovic, like Musetti, he's not able to, win those backhand to backhand exchanges. And the backhand generally is fantastic, but, well, it's very good. It's not elite, though. And when he's got more time, it means he's able to drive it. He doesn't want to be slicing on the backhand. It's something that he needs to work on. It's really a defensive slice. It's a bit floaty. It's not really much on. It's something for him to look to improve. But generally, I think he will be dangerous at the US Open. Of course, has good memories from last year, beating Tsitsipas. So let's see how he gets on as well. I'm looking forward to seeing him because I just feel that, Carlos Alcaraz, there's a lot of hype around him, but maybe these losses might have helped him, if I'm being honest with you. Just helped maybe take a little bit of pressure off him, and then he'll feel potentially like, okay, people aren't expecting too much, and he might feel a little bit better, potentially. Felix Auger-Aliassime became the first man, of course, born in the 2000s to reach a major semi-final. That was last year at the US Open, and I have to say, he will be my number 6. Why, you ask? It's obvious. He loves the hard courts. He really does. Probably his favorite surface. Of course, would have grown up on them. We saw that he also does like the grass generally, but didn't do very well at Wimbledon this year. Last year, made the quarterfinals and lost to Berrettini. This year, lost to Maxime Cressy. It can happen. It's not a great style. Should be winning it, but, we'll be disappointed, of course, to lose in the end. But for me, FA, is a fantastic player, no doubt. I'm looking forward to seeing him in action. He actually didn't take any press after the loss to Cam Norrie in the semi-finals of Las Cabos. That was a little bit disappointing. I'm hoping it's probably a tough loss for him to swallow. I think he actually has had some success against Norrie in the past, but he's a tricky opponent, of course. But he will have to dig deep, I think, going forward. And there's clearly been big changes. He went relatively deep, of course, at Roland Garros and lost to Rafa in 5 sets in a thriller. He made massive steps at Roland Garros, then, of course, a setback at Wimbledon. And that will happen when you're adjusting your game for the clay and then you suddenly have to jump onto a grass court, which is a lot quicker. He now kind of goes back to a slower surface, but one he's more familiar on, one with, regular bounce, one that he doesn't have to worry too much about the court coming up with surprises. And I think he'll feel a bit more comfortable on it. He'll move a bit better. He'll just feel generally like, you know what, I feel like someone who is at home on this surface. Number 7. So we've got Nadal, Medvedev, Kyrgios, Sinner, Alcaraz, FA. I'm very interested to know, by the way, your guys' thoughts on this after, because it's very difficult early on to get a gauge of it, and it will change massively, of course. I'm going to go with Cam Norrie. Now, I know a lot of people don't rate Cam Norrie that highly, and that's fair enough. That's everyone's opinion. I think he is a limited player, no doubt. He's talked recently about making world number one. If I'm being honest, I can't ever see that happening, but that doesn't mean that it can't happen. He clearly has high aspirations. He's driven, he's motivated, he's improved a hell of a lot in the last few years. His forehand was, very average, I'd have to say, in terms of a top player. And now his forehand is more of a weapon. He's able to find fantastic angles off it cross court, drag opponents out, high topspin. He's given himself more coverage over the net, but also able to hit the ball harder and flatter at times if he needs to on the forehand side. It's just more hurtful. It's not just a rallying shot, and one that he, to be honest, used to sometimes spray if he wanted to get on the front foot. We saw a little bit of that against Medvedev, and I think when people frustrate him and they're able to outlast him, which for him is a crazy, he's someone who is extremely fit and he doesn't expect to be outlasted on court. And I think Medvedev is one of the only players, there's a handful of players, very small group of players that are able to stick with Norrie. And I think when that happens, it can get frustrating. He then tries to be the aggressor and it's not his forte. And that's why he, in the end, ultimately fell to Medvedev. The backhand is flat. And of course, as I always mention, you get 2 different balls with him. It's interesting. It's one that I guess is kind of similar to Medvedev's. It is this flat backhand. They both got very weird, extreme grips on the backhand or techniques. And it works for them, though. It's flat. It's effective. They get a lot of purchase off pretty much every surface, apart from, I guess, clay, although Cam Norrie likes the clay, and maybe that's because, unlike Medvedev, who hits flat off both wings, he actually has one wing, the forehand, which is a lot of topspin, backhand flatter, so it means that his game's maybe more transferable over surfaces, if we're talking out the base of it. For Medvedev, though, of course, massive serve as well, fantastic returner, so that's transferable on all surfaces, and he has adapted his forehand in terms of having different looks and different ways of hitting it. He can hit a more kind of high topspin ball on the forehand side. It's not his preference, but of course he'll do it if he needs to. You can tell. So that's my number 7, Cam Norrie. I think he's definitely an underrated player. Made the final of Los Cabos, of course, and he's made some fantastic results recently with making the semi-finals of Wimbledon, taking a set off Novak Djokovic. So, he needs to get his plaudits, I think, as well. He's a very good player, no doubt. Then we need to look, and then becomes a bit harder to start talking about players because someone like Zverev, would be in there. Made the semi-finals last year, and made the final as well against Dominic Thiem a few years ago. He is injured. Stefanos Tsitsipas has just been, if I'm being honest, in some adverse and abject performances recently. Not particularly sold on Stefanos Tsitsipas recently. I don't feel like he has particularly kicked on. Of course, lost to Kyrgios in 4 sets in the 3rd round of Wimbledon. And, I'm not quite sure where he lies at the moment. Indian Wells this year, lost to Brooksby, lost to Alcaraz in Miami, the Mexican Open. He, lost to Cam Norrie, lost to Seth Yulin in an Open 13 tournament, lost to Felix in Rotterdam in the final in straights. Australian Open, of course, lost to Medvedev in the semi-final. Sorry, Tsitsipas made the semi-final and of the Australian Open this year. So do we put him up there? Because, he dismantled Sinner, who I have on the list, in straight sets. And am I writing him off too early? He has had good results at Grand Slams. That's one thing you have to say about him. He hasn't won one yet, but he has gone deep. In every Grand Slam, apart from, if I'm not mistaken, Wimbledon, he's made a quarterfinal at least, right? He made the final of the French, made a semi-final of the US last year, semi-final, sorry, this year, of the Australia this year. Last year, made the final of the French. He's got the results. Let's put him in there. I'm not sold, and I'm not sure if he's going to stay in there. We'll see what his results look like, but he's my number 8. Number 9. I think with Tsitsipas, though, the slower surface at the US should suit his game more, but I just feel like he's becoming more and more like a clay court specialist. And I don't want that to be the case because he's got a good enough game to be good on all surfaces. He worked really hard in the grass court swing to try and improve his grass court game, and he did. He just lost to a player that ended up making the final in Kyrgios, who's a very good player at the moment, one of the most informed players of the year. That can happen. Lost in 4 sets. He was very competitive for sure. This should be a surface he's even more comfortable on. Let's see what he can do. I'm hoping he comes trumps. Then we got to think about other players who maybe aren't particularly on everyone's radar, and Hubert Hurkacz is one of them, right? He is. Of course, did play Washington and lost to Ruusuvuori though in the first round, which is a hard first round, no doubt. He should be winning that though. That would have been disappointing. Of course, in Wimbledon lost in the first round to Dariusz Fokina. He's going to have to start winning soon, otherwise his ranking is going to drop pretty dramatically. So if we go back to Miami, though, of course, he'd won there previously. He lost in the semis to Alcaraz. There's no harm in that. We've got to think about this. Rublev has to be number 9. Rublev, of course, made the quarterfinals last year, if I'm not mistaken, of the US and lost. He made the semifinals just now of Washington, even lost in Nishioka. He is someone who should be dangerous. He's got more time on the ball. It's a hard court. He should be able to drive through it, wind up the forehand and backhand. He's starting to add some bits to his game from what I've seen this year when I have watched some of his matches and done commentary for them. Let's see how he looks. I'm hoping he just plays his best tennis. And if it's not good enough, it's not good enough. But for me, Andrey Rublev is a player that should be winning a Grand Slam in his career. If he doesn't finish his career and hasn't won a Grand Slam, I think it's a wasted opportunity. Or not a wasted career, I think that's a bit harsh, but a career which has underachieved. Then number 10, to round off the list. It's difficult. It really is, because you might look towards a Hurkacz, but he's not been in good form. You might look towards a Shapovalov. He's been in terrible form. Do you know what I mean? Like, all these players, none of these players are looking particularly good right now. And it's tough. It's very, very tough, because I want to believe that these players are going to do well, but no one actually seems to be stepping up. And that's why there's such a big gap. Of course, there's some omissions, and that's a massive shame, but these guys need to be stepping up. Taylor Fritz is going to be playing Andy Murray in the Rogers Cup in the first round. That's tough for him. He made the round of 16 against Dan Evans, and then, of course, a lot of people thought he might have quit, but wasn't handling, I think, the heat very well, and ended up, retiring at 4-1 in the third set. It was 1-set all at that point. In Wimbledon, had chances against Nadal, in the quarterfinal, didn't take them. He will be disappointed by that. And he, of course, had a very good hardcourt swing. He did. He had a very good hardcourt swing. Made the quarterfinals of Houston, Miami Open, made the round of 16. Indian Wells, of course, won, beat Fritz, beat Nadal in the final, beat Rublev, beat Kekmanovic, De Minaur, Matrak. So, he's a good player, a very good player. Someone who I think is starting to peak this year. He lost to Stefanos Tsitsipas in 5 sets in the 4th round of Australia. Tsitsipas made the semi-final. Fritz was 2 sets to 1 up. Choked a little bit, you have to say. So I'm going to go with Taylor Fritz. Massive server, of course, as we know. He's going to be playing at home. Hopefully, he will take that on board. Hopefully, he'll think, yes, you know what? I'm feeling good. He lost to Jensen Brooksby in the second round, a fellow American, last year in 4 sets. He was a set up there. He beat Dimino in the first round, which is a great win. Dimino's in some good form as well. He's probably unlucky not to make this list, I have to say. But Taylor Fritz, massive, massive serve. Backhand is good. Forehand, good. He's pretty much good in everything apart from coming to the net. Needs to improve his transitioning and also just being brave enough and having the intent to come to the net to finish off points at times. Doesn't look, it's not a question of everyone needs to be doing that, but he is good enough to be doing that, Taylor Fritz. And that doesn't necessarily mean on every point. It just means having at least that option to go to at times so that you're not being one-dimensional. And he is a power baseliner, someone who just is going to sit there and you know you're going to get with him. Needs to improve that aspect of his game and become a bit more dynamic. And if he does, he will be a lot more dangerous for sure. So that's my power rankings so far for the US Open, my first edition. Let me know your thoughts. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe if you're new. And of course, if you're listening on a podcast platform, do remember to leave a rating review. And we'll see you guys very soon. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you next.